So welcome to Untangle, where we're untangling Christianity from theology, religion, and colonization. And in this episode, we wanted to do something different. We're tackling a really complex topic, so we wanted to do it in a long-form content. But before we do that, I wanted to make sure it was clear. In this video, we are not criticizing anybody's Christianity. We're not saying that anybody has done anything wrong. We're saying we think there's a different way to look at our Christian walk, to look at our Christian faith. And if we shift our frame to be able to see Jesus, see Christianity, and see the Bible that way, we believe that it will lead you to have a much freer walk with Jesus. And that's what we want for you. Thanks for tuning in, and we hope you enjoy. So welcome to Untangle, where we're untangling Christianity from theology, religion, and colonization. And we're back doing a podcast format again this time. I've invited my friend back, Mr. Lawrence Wills, and so he's here to kind of help me guide the discussion. And so what we wanted to do in this episode was really kind of follow up on our last conversation where we talked about Jesus as philosophy. And what I want to do today, as I talk to you, is talk about how I believe that if we begin to think of Jesus as teaching a philosophy, then what it does is fundamentally change the way that we like to do evangelism, right? And to put this in perspective, I'll tell you, I started to put out just an apology to all, I started to put out an apology to people and just kind of say, hey, listen, I want to apologize if me or any other genuine Christian, somebody who was really trying to follow Jesus, if any of us actually got so focused on teaching you who Jesus was that we forgot to teach you what Jesus taught. And I wanted to be able to say, if you give me a chance, I'd like to do it better, right? And I think that's really important because in that statement, what I'm trying to clarify is that we've done this really interesting thing with the gospel where we split it into two, right? And I can understand how we do it. And it's important to understand that in the Bible, there's two gospels, right? So before Jesus dies, when Jesus first comes on the scene, right, he starts saying, I want to preach to you the gospel of the kingdom of heaven. That's what he wants to preach, right? And so he does that. The kingdom of heaven is like this. And he starts teaching us how we should live. Hey, the kingdom of heaven is like a woman who lost a coin. The kingdom of heaven is like a shepherd who lost a sheep. The kingdom of heaven, you can bind and loose in it. Whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven, right? He starts laying out all these really cool ways for us to live. But after Jesus dies, you begin to see this new phrase come about. And you see it called the gospel of Jesus Christ, right? And this gospel is focused on the person of Jesus, the death, the burial, and resurrection of Jesus, right? That's the gospel. He died for our sins, right? But for me, when you focus on the gospel of Jesus without the gospel of the kingdom of heaven, then what you begin to do is you begin to preach a gospel that doesn't tell everything that it should tell about Jesus, at least in my view, right? So let me preface that, right? In my view. And here's how I would explain that, right? Okay. If Jesus came back right now and I ran up to him and I was like, Jesus, I'm so glad you're here. I'm excited. He's like, what's up, Wes? He was like, hey, what you been telling everybody? And I was like, yo, I told him you was born in Bethlehem. I told him you was 33 years old. I told him you had a mother named Mary. I told him that everybody thought Joseph was your father, but he wasn't, right? Jesus was like, oh, that's dope. Did you tell him what I told you about how to live? Did you tell him any of that stuff? And I was like, I mean, sometimes, like, if it related to who you were, right, then I told him. But if it didn't relate to who you were, then I didn't really, right? I can't imagine Jesus would be like, yo, man, that's all good. I think he'd be like, well, why didn't you tell him what I told you about the kingdom of heaven? Why didn't you tell him that I told you that they don't have to wait until they get to heaven to have joy? They can have it right now. Why didn't you tell them they don't have to wait until they get to heaven to have peace? I gave it to them right now. Why didn't you tell them that they don't have to wait to heaven to help people get healed? I told them that they can help do that right now. Why didn't you tell them any of that stuff? And we say, well, because that was the gospel you preached. We preached a gospel that was about you. Instead of teaching what you taught, we taught about you. And I think for me, that fundamentally changes evangelism, right? Because if you recognize that, then you recognize that when Jesus stood up and he says, hey, the kingdom of God is like a shepherd who loses one sheep and leaves the 99 to go find the one, right? The people in the crowd would have heard that as a philosophy of life, right? Because he wasn't referring to scripture. He was telling a parable. Okay. So the people in the crowd would have been like, hey, that's interesting. Tell me more about that. He's like, oh, yeah. You leave the 99 for the one because in the kingdom of heaven, one is just as important as the 99. So when you live your life here, guys, you should actually see every single person as important, right? That's how the kingdom of God says to work. Of course. Right? And so then we now know how to live. We can go out into the world and we can say, man, I got to make sure that I see every single person as important. But if we stop at the gospel of Jesus, right, then what happens is I start to look and I'll be like, should I consider that person important? Nah, it don't matter. Jesus died for my sins. You see what I'm saying? Like, and so we live in such a way now, and this is where it changes evangelism, right? Is we live in such a way, and people are doing this all over the country. People are doing this in their workspaces right now. They're trying to be the best person that they can be, right? So that someone will ask them and they can say, hey, the reason I'm like this is because Jesus died for my sins, right? Whereas me, I'm on the other side and I say, I'm not waiting around living the best I can to teach you about Jesus. I'm waiting around trying to be the best person I can so that I can teach you what Jesus taught. And I think that's a distinct difference, and it takes a lot longer, right? Do you understand the relationship you have to be in with somebody, not just to teach them about Jesus, but then to be able to say, oh yeah, Jesus said this, and he said that, and he said this, and he said that, right? So I'm not focused on converts. In fact, I'm more focused on disciples. People who can take the philosophy Jesus chose to live, which I think Jesus is really cool in, that he summarized it for us, right? Because it's very hard to give somebody a philosophy of life, right? It's very hard to be like, this philosophy of life is how you move forward. Jesus spent 3 years doing it with people, right? But then for the rest of us, he summarized it. He said, here's your philosophy in life. Here it is. You should love the Lord your God with all your heart, your mind, your soul, your strength. Love your neighbor as you're loving yourself, right? So in other words, if you love someone, you want the highest good for them, right? So Jesus says, be the highest good for God, for yourself, and for others. And if you use that philosophy as your way to approach the world, then guess what? You are now following what I taught. So by doing so, following what Jesus taught is actually following Jesus. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. But I have questions.
Okay. All right. Give me the questions, man.
So what you're saying is traditionally in evangelism, when it comes to evangelism, Christians have come to a point where all we're doing is just telling people about who he is. And by doing so, we are shortchanging the people that we are trying to bring to Jesus. Is that what you're saying?
I think not necessarily bring to Jesus, but help people have the fullest life. Right?
So so evangelism for you goes way beyond just bringing people to faith. It's just...
Well, I would argue it's not for me. I would argue Matthew 28:19 and 20, right? This is Jesus about to leave.
Right.
This is the last thing. He's like, he like, dude, hey, before I go, this is the one thing. This is it right here. And everybody tuned in. He was like, yo, listen, go make disciples, teaching them to follow everything that I instructed you. And then I'll be with you to the end of days. Okay. So Jesus said, yo, proper evangelism is that when you leave a person, they should now be able to follow the philosophy I gave for you for life, for their own life. If they can't do that part, then you did not disciple them. Because remember, the idea of disciples was an actual concept back then, right? The most basic way for us to understand it is, and it's sad, but it's the only way we teach it right now, is we go back to the Plato and Socrates analogy, right? In that sense, Socrates was the teacher. Plato's job was to learn everything Socrates said about life, be able to repeat it and teach it to other people. right? That's what the idea of a disciple was.
Right.
So for Jesus, when he says, go and make disciples, he's saying, live in the same, create people who are going to live with the same spirit of functioning in this world that I taught to you, that I lived in, right? And so, I love analogies. So, right. So if I said to you, hey, I want you to live in the spirit of Martin Luther King, right? Then you would know what that meant. You would mean, oh, you want me to fight for justice. You want me to be peaceful. You want me to be a great orator, whatever it might be, right? So by doing that, that's what Jesus is saying. People need to be able to live in the same philosophy of approaching the world that I taught. If they can't do that, then you have not discipled them, right? But we're not focused on that part. We're not. I'm just saying that's okay. To be clear. I'm just saying that's what changes with evangelism is, and we even use the language different, right? We don't talk about disciples. We talk about converts, right? How many converts do we have? Because a convert is a one-time thing that happened.
Right.
And that's what I think is interesting is what I'm asking people to do by telling you to view Jesus as philosophy, view what he's teaching as philosophy is harder. It's actually harder, right?
More time consuming.
Huh?
I'll say that.
Yeah. Sure. More time consuming.
There you
I'll
go.
take that. Right.
All right.
Right. I actually would.
I know.
I would say it's harder, man. I would because
it is hard. It's not an
hard,
easy thing to do because to take somebody who does not, who hasn't came to know Jesus for themselves, to go from that to get them to full surrender and I'm following Jesus, it is a very hard task. I'm not taking that off the table.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is this: from what I know, for evangelism to be is like, and tell me if I'm wrong. Tell me if the church got it wrong for showing me this way. Okay. By going to someone and telling them about the goodness of Jesus, giving them the good news. And by doing so.
Now we got to define good news because to be clear,
here we go.
I'm just saying the good news, Jesus preached good news before he died.
Right.
Let's be clear. And he actually empowered the disciples before he died to go out and preach the good news.
Hey.
So it couldn't be the good news of his death, burial, and resurrection because he ain't died yet.
He knew he was, though.
Huh? So you think...
I don't know.
I want to be... All right.
No.
Okay. What are you advocating?
No, I'm not. I'm not advocating for
nothing.
I'm not advocating for nothing.
Right. Okay.
Now, if you want to start arguing, we start arguing.
No, I don't know.
I'm just trying too hard to focus.
Okay,
so let me back up.
Because I was going to say... I was like,
No. Check this out. So I'm saying this. So say by going to someone and teaching them about the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus, by doing so, that they felt so compelled to go learn about who this person that died for me was.
I don't think anything's wrong with that. But then I would ask, why didn't you help them? Why didn't you help them? Right? We're so focused.
One can say that was the help. I told them that it was something there.
Okay. All right. So let me be clear. Let me be clear because I want to be clear on what we mean by following Jesus, right? Okay. Or to be saved or salvation or whatever we want to use it, right? We can do the whole faith without works is dead thing. We can do the many will say, Lord, Lord, I cast out demons. We could do the appearance. I'm just saying appearance of godliness, but far from. We could do all of that, right?
Do a lot of that.
And the point of that, the reason we do that is to show that if you just simply proclaim without actually living and following the philosophy that Jesus sent, then you're not doing it the way that it was intended to be done. Is that fair enough?
Yeah, I can say that. But are you saying that that's what's being done with evangelism today in the church?
Yes. I call it one-night stand evangelism. Like, we love to one-night stand people. We do. I call it one-night stand evangelism. We love to hit people with, just to be clear, we love to hit people with it like, bam, you got Jesus tonight.
I'll see you later.
Yeah. And then we ghost them. Right? To be clear, we quite literally ghost them. Not always. There are some people who do
really
not always.
Jobs. No, I know you're not making a blanket statement. But
it's
hard to refute.
It's hard to refute that, right?
Yeah, because this one time I saw somebody, and in the 5 minutes I had them, I told them who Jesus was, and then I never saw him.
Well, and then I ghosted them, right? And so, as a result of
hold on. So, what if all I have is that 1 5-minute moment with that person?
I think that's amazing that God would give you that kind of moment, right? So then I would say, let's use the moment better.
Okay.
Right? I would say, so then we say, hey, listen, hey, you believe in Jesus? You believe he died for your sins and all that? Yeah. All right. here's what I want you to do next. That's amazing, right? Instead of just giving the hug and dapping and leaving, say, hey, that's amazing. What I'd love for you to do next is I'd love for you to start in, my book. You don't like my book, but
So why would you say something like that? Why would you say something like that?
Because you like an Old Testament guy. Lawrence is an Old Testament guy. To be clear,
I was afraid of this.
You was afraid.
I was afraid.
All right, tell me.
I told you that. What we talked about.
I'm sorry.
It's not that I'm just an Old Testament guy. I have a love for the Old Testament because it puts the stuff that a lot of Christians like to emphasize, like the New Testament. It puts the New Testament in its right context.
I get it.
You
wanted to clarify.
I'm not a huge fan
of starting in John. But I think if you're going to say, all right, I don't have much time, right? But I don't know where to put a person. Then I would say, hey, here's what I want you to do. I want you to start in John. And every time you see Jesus say words, I want you to think about how you can do your version of those words.
Okay.
Right? And I think that for me would be a better way.
That part I don't mind.
Okay, all right.
No, when framed like that, I don't mind.
Okay.
I just like, because we're so big on tradition, the why part is always big for me. Now, if I have only 5 minutes with a person and I got to get them the stuff, and whatever I give them in that 5 minutes is all I'm able to give them, I can understand why somebody would say, John, go.
But see, that's my point, right? Is if you have 5 minutes, right? That's my problem with tradition and how it messes us up. Is if you have 5 minutes, we think if you got 5 minutes, you got to do death, burial, resurrection.
Give them the stuff.
You got to,
saying.
right?
Yeah.
But I think that by doing that, we miss something crucial. And that is that I believe the gospel isn't death, burial, resurrection. It's Jesus' life, death, burial, and resurrection. And I think that's very important. And the reason it's important is because what often happens is we get so focused on death, burial, resurrection that we forget to recognize Jesus was teaching us how to live.
Right.
And he thinks that living, following the gospel of the kingdom of heaven, by following what he's teaching, also takes you to heaven.
Okay.
If you think about it, he says in Luke 7:38, right? Or I think it's 7:38, but he's talking and he says, hey, if you give to people without expecting back, if you do good to others and all of these things, then you will be children of God, right? In Jesus's mind, you can actually follow his teachings, and by following his teachings, you can also be restored back to the Father. Because for Jesus, when he says, I'm the way, the truth, and the life, he doesn't see himself as distinct from what he's teaching. But we act like the only thing that matters is Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection. And I say that doesn't really make sense, right? Because if all that mattered was Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection, then why did he stay here for 33 years? Why not die at 9, right? Jesus could have died at 9. I'm just saying. It still would have been.
I know exactly what you're saying.
It would have been the shedding of blood. It would have been the forgiveness of sins, all of that. So it feels weird to me then that Jesus would be like, yo, I'm going to stay here for 33 years. And not only am I going to stay here for 33 years, I'm going to spend a lot of time teaching people how to live. I'm going to talk about money. I'm going to talk about family. I'm going to talk about others. I'm going to talk about God. I'm going to talk about worship. I'm going to talk about so many ways. And then on top of all of that, I'm afraid people may get confused. So I'm going to take everything that I said and I'm going to condense it down to one command. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, your mind, your soul, and your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself, right? I'm gonna take the entire philosophy, everything that I've been telling people, I'm going to condense it down to this one thing, and I'm going to teach them that, right? And we act like that does not matter for salvation. And I say, that doesn't make sense to me. If Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection has implications for our eternity, then Jesus' life has implications for our eternity. And the beauty of Jesus' life is it not only has implications for our eternity, it has implications for our life. And that's the part that I think is oftentimes we find missing, and that's what's going on in our world today in my mind, right? In my mind, right now, we have the mass exodus from the church. We have people confused. We have more people claiming nuns. We have more people saying they're anti-Christianity. We have all of those things, and we all, within Christianity, do this collective sigh like we don't know what's happening. Oh, I don't know what happened. And it gets on my nerves because if you take just a second and talk to any of the people who have found themselves in the nuns, not in the church, not going, right? And just ask them why, right? They'll tell you. And in most cases, it goes something like this. Man, my world got really, really complicated.
Right.
Whether that was I couldn't handle the racial shootings that happened. I couldn't handle the political unrest. I saw death in the COVID. The environment is really bothering me. Whatever it is, I got really, really complicated. And then I went to the place that was supposed to help me, and what they gave me did not help me for living. It might help me when I get ready to go to the next place, but it didn't help me for living. Perfect example. No, let me give my example.
I'll let you,
go.
Okay,
Right. So here's my example.
Okay.
Right? My own personal story. I keep sharing this story, but it's a real one, right? Philando Castile gets killed. Everybody has one. Wherever you stand on the topic, doesn't matter, right? Essentially, for me, I had a hard time as a result because I don't care what it is. A man died in front of his daughter. Dude, that's crazy to me. And in my case, I believe he told he had a weapon and still died in front of his daughter. And that felt crazy to me, right? So I was at work. I went to my boss and I said to my boss, hey, stuff's going on. I can't be here. And this is what really bothered me. My boss, coolest boss in the world, turned to me and said, Wes, I understand, bro. You need to go home. Go home. So I left, but I wasn't settled, right? Because I know work is not where I find my purpose. Work is not where I find my deepest convictions. Work is not where I find my true self, right? So then I thought, let's go to the place where I do. So I called the pastor of the church I was attending, and I said to him, hey, man, I'm really struggling with what happened. Are you guys going to say anything about this? And he said to me, we got together as a team and decided we're just going to focus on the gospel. And I remember saying to him, but doesn't the gospel speak to pain? And he said to me, yeah, but it speaks to all pain. And I thought he just all lives mattered my pain. But essentially,
that's what you're saying.
What essentially happened, I could tell you, is he probably preached an amazing sermon on Sunday. But I didn't go. And I didn't go because I knew whatever he was going to say was not going to help me with what I had going on right now, with the confusion I had, with the frustration I have. And there are people at home right now, and they're confused, right? Because they've looked at whatever's happened in whatever past amount of years, whatever it is, they've looked at it and they've said, man, it feels like the people, the places, the churches, the radio stations, the pastors I'm listening to, it feels like they're coming down on opposite sides of issues that I feel like should be clearer, right? And so I don't know what to do. I'm in muddy water here, right? And so then they go and they say, how do I navigate this muddy water? And instead of us saying, you know what? This is the gospel of Jesus's life. This is how he taught us how to deal with muddy water, right? When you see a police shooting, you ask yourself, you know what? Jesus says, if you do this for the least of these, you do it for me. How do I look at that situation and figure out who's the least of these? And how do I serve them? How do I figure out how do I do the highest good for God, for myself, and for others in every situation? And so when I look at the environment, I know the truth of the matter is I got to get to work, right? So I may drive a car. In my case, I don't drive one that uses gas, right? But some people do.
Oh, here we go.
No, I'm just saying it's true.
You just had
right?
to throw that in.
No, I did. I'm just saying I look out for the environment.
You were on a roll.
Okay. All right. Anyway. All right. So I say, all right, how do I know that I care about the environment, right? But I have to get to work because I have to care for my family. So what is a way that I might be the highest good to the environment, that's to others, right? To myself, so that I could continue to take care of my family, and to God, right? And that I want to honor what he would have me do in this situation. And that is a principle you can use in life. That's a principle you can use in muddy water, right? That's a principle you can apply in any kind of situation. Oh, I'm struggling with pain. How do I be the highest good to all three of these people? Oh, I'm confused about a thing. How do I be the highest good to all three of these parties? Whatever happens in life, you can use that, right? But I can tell you, when you're struggling because you're dealing with grief for somebody that you don't know because they got killed in front of their daughter on TV and you don't know what to do, I can tell you, if you pick up your phone and you call me and I'm in that mode and you say, yo, man, just remember Jesus died for sins. Bro, I can tell you, I'm not going to find that as helpful. Now, is it true? Yes. Is it beautiful? Yes. But is it useful? And I can't say in that case, I would find it useful. But that's why I think we can't just do death, burial, resurrection. We have to do life, death, burial, resurrection. We have to do what did Jesus teach? He stayed here for a very long time to make sure we get it. So we can't say, well, we're only going to talk about it if it helps people better understand that he was God. It's like, no, even if he was just teaching as an amazing human teacher, right? He's still Jesus teaching it. Mm-hmm. We need to know what he said. Right. And we need to know how that works. And that's what makes it useful. And now you got me on my little rant because I actually think this is a deep, deep issue.
It is.
It's a deep issue because what we're trying to do, it feels like in our culture, in our society, is to do exactly what those pastors did to me. We're trying to create a gospel that doesn't have to touch culture, right? I'll give you another example, and I use this one a lot, right? Halloween is happening. There's a massive church on my way home, right? Massive church. I'm driving on my way home.
Right.
I drive by this church. They got signs out sometimes. Come join us, visit us, right? Whatever, right? So I'm driving home on Halloween. Just took my kid to a trunk or treat, right? And I'm driving by this church. And as I drive by, it's Halloween night. No lights are on. Nobody's in the parking lot, right? So I asked myself, all right, here's the thing. I've been in church ministry. Here's the thing, right? Even if you don't agree with Halloween, if you know there's one night when everybody in your neighborhood, you want the neighborhood to know you a light, you want them to know you there, you want to be there for them, whatever it is. There's one night, you know, everybody going to be outside. This is that night. But I know what happened is that, because I'm, like I told you, I've been in church ministry.
Right.
I know that the leaders got together probably on Monday, right? Maybe they took Monday off. Some take Friday off, some take Monday off. But they probably got together on Monday, right? And they said, oh, Halloween's coming up. What are we going to do? And they said, we don't believe in Halloween. We're going to do nothing, right? And so in that sense, think about what just happened. They got together in here and decided, I know all of my neighbors, everybody in the community around me thinks this day is an important day. They care about it. And I want to say I care about them. But the thing that they're saying is important, we don't even got to deal with. We're just going to focus on the gospel. As if the gospel plays no role for what this group of people care about. Mm-hmm. You see what I'm saying? And so in that sense, that's how we're treating the world right now, right? And we do it in small and big ways, right? We do it in small ways like that, right? Or the pastor who went, I don't know if you saw him, he went viral because he was yelling at everybody about the Super Bowl.
No, I didn't see that.
Okay.
So don't traumatize me more.
Well, no, I'm about to. Oh, you're going to get it all right here. No, this pastor, he gets up there and he starts yelling. He's just going off. It's Super Bowl Sunday. Ain't nobody in here. Y'all spending more time with that. And I thought to myself, essentially, what he's saying is there's 300 million people in the United States. 160 million were estimated to be watching the Super Bowl that day, right? He is saying, I know all 160 million of you think this day is important, but you shouldn't care about that. You should care about what I'm talking about. You see what I'm saying? And that feels ridiculous to me. What would be better is if you said, how do we take what I'm talking about here and bring it to you guys, you 160 million that are going to be watching the game? Why don't we do a tailgate here? Why don't we put up a big thing outside, throw a barbecue? Why don't we figure out how to bring that truth into culture instead of trying to make it stand apart from culture, right? And we do that in, like I said, in ways like Philando Castile and ways like Halloween and ways like that. But our goal is essentially to say, how do we keep the gospel away from the messiness of culture, right? We do it with politics. We do it with all of that. And so anyway, I say that all that to say, I think if we look back at our history, we will find that has not worked in our favor, and it is not how the gospel spread. And in particular, my favorite example is Christmas. Christmas season was not a Christian season.
Honestly.
But the Christians then saw that the other people were out celebrating their religious rituals and celebrating their gods. And instead of them being like, we ain't gonna do nothing with that, they said, yo, let's throw our parallel celebration celebrating Jesus. And now what does Christmas season look like? That's our season now, right? That's what happens when Jesus comes into culture instead of us trying to keep him away from culture. And all of that, all of that goes back to the central idea that we have to evangelize differently. We have to evangelize in a way that teaches people how to use the truth in culture instead of just say, hey, I make converts by telling them about Jesus. So the gospel of Jesus and the gospel of the kingdom of heaven have to merge instead of us treating them as separate things.
So you unpacked a lot.
Yeah, my bad.
No. I love this. I love this part. Okay. But I want to go back to some of the things that you mentioned. Okay. Just to get some more clarity or some more understanding. Mm-hmm. And some might say that I'm going to shoot the church some bail. And
okay. I should.
But it's not going to be necessarily bail. I just want to see what your perspective is. Okay. So you had mentioned about like how if all I have is 5 minutes with a person, what's being said in that 5 minutes is very, very crucial. Mm-hmm. So this is where I start to shoot the church some bail. Some would say that if all I had was 5 minutes, I want to give them the stuff that's going to weigh with them. Because remember, if I'm talking to someone that does not know Jesus for themselves, and I had this, like what you say, these two gospels, right? How do I pick which one is more important? And
that's easy.
Because how do I go talk about the teachings of Jesus if you don't know who Jesus is to begin with? No, and why is it important for me to even know him?
Oh, that's easy. That's what I'm saying. It's really easy when we remember one simple thing. Okay. The gospel means good news. Right. Now, I don't know if you've ever got some real life-changing good news, right? Like good news that changed your life. In most cases, that good news applies to what you are experiencing right now, right? Okay. So then what you want to be able to do is be able to share whatever good news about Jesus, his teaching or his person, whichever one for this person is going to be good news, right? What's going to be relevant for them? My favorite example of this is think about the Ethiopian eunuch, right? Okay. Philip runs up on the Ethiopian eunuch. He starts reading and Philip is like, what you reading, right? The Ethiopian eunuch starts and Philip says, oh, I'll start from right where you are, right? Because the Ethiopian eunuch says, I'm confused. I don't even know what this means, right? But he says, no, I'll start from right with the passage you're reading and I'll lead you from that passage back to Jesus, right? Whether that's Jesus' teaching or whether that's Jesus the person. Either way, right? But the key is when that Ethiopian eunuch heard it, he was like, I'm confused. And then once Philip was done talking, he says, yo, man, that's some really good news, right? So for us, we keep forgetting that the gospel is meant to be good news. We think it's supposed to be truth. It's supposed to be both, right? And so if all we want to do is make sure they get the truth, death, burial, resurrection, we're going to make sure they get the truth. But I'm saying good
news in the truth, though.
There is, right? There is good news in the truth. Right. But the beauty of good news is that it applies to what's happening with that person now.
So real quick. And you've done the black church evangelism. But we all pack up.
Oh, yeah.
We go run down on some strangers. We knock on a few doors. And we don't even got 5 minutes. 5 minutes would be perfect.
Yeah, you ain't even got that.
I can bust this down.
Now, at this point, you throwing tracks in the doors.
Sometimes I don't even get my name out.
Okay. All right.
So let's say that gets reduced down to a 30, right? So I don't have time to get your story because 9 times out of 10, I wouldn't say 9 times out of 10, majority of the time when we do evangelism in that way, yeah, maybe that's something. We're not going to get receptive. Yeah, that's it. Maybe we're going out trying to force the word on people because in those situations where I've been in where I don't get no backstory on you, I don't even have a lot of time because really you don't want to talk to me, especially when I open up with Do you know the goodness of the Lord?
Right.
Do you have Jesus in your life? Have you said?
But those are converts versus disciples, and that's what we're hoping for. That's
So-
what we're hoping for.
See, now I'm getting weary because because if I'm tracking,
Uh-huh.
you're saying is that the church has converted itself to where we are more concerned on how many people you can get to come here. How many people can you convert versus like, how many people did you disciple?
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm not even going.
So that's what you're saying.
I'm saying that. Yes,
Okay.
I am saying that. I want to be clear.
All right.
No, is that you get no debate from me. I think that, and it goes all the way back to our foundation of our theology, right?
Before you get into the weeds of that,
all right.
Before you get into the weeds, because now you hurt my heart when you said
Okay,
that.
all right. I know.
You hurt my heart.
It hurts me too.
But understand this. So what do? I'm a small church. I'm a small church that's on 7th Street in Kansas City, Kansas. And I am looking to get more people in my doors. Not just get people in my doors. I want to share this gospel with as many people as I can. But I know getting them in the door so we can get into the deep stuff is needed. Getting them through the door is an extremely hard part.
Why?
You have so many people that
No, I'm saying, why do we have to get them in the door?
I see what you're saying. Well, I mean, the door will allow that time needed so I can give them.
Well, because let me be clear. Yeah, I want to be clear. I'm not dissuading the local church.
Right.
I'm talking about the mindset of it. Right.
No, the mindset of
it. All right. So I'll switch it. Right.
Okay.
So right now there's a theory right now that we need to that you can study this right now. You can Google it. It's called the hour-long church service. Right. The goal.
I hate that.
I know, but I'm just telling you. The goal is to get your church service down to an hour, because if you could do that, we think that allows for a better evangelism tool, right? We tell people, hey, man, come to church with me. And they be like, it's just an hour. And they'll be like, oh, okay, it's just an hour, right? The goal there, or the mindset that we have there, is that church is an interruption in your life, right? That's the mindset. That's why, just give me an hour, I'll interrupt your life for an hour, and then you can go back to life.
Can we feel like we're inconveniencing them
Right.
by sharing the gospel?
Right, because of the way that we think about church, right? Okay. We think about church with converts. We think about church with hearing sermons, all of that. But one of the interesting things is you and I both work at a building where there is another culture who does church in our building, right? They're a Burmese.
Right.
And I would tell you, their Sundays are 6-8 hour services, right?
So it's a thing.
Right. And for them, that's not an interruption in life. That's part of it. We're going to eat. We're going to let the kids play. We're going to do that, right? And so the idea for them is not church as the sermon and the worship. It's church as in the people and the family. And so I would say, what happens if instead of us saying, I'm a small church on 7th Street, I'm just trying to get people in my doors. Mm-hmm. What if we instead said, hey, man, I'm a small church on 7th Street. Let's go out and see how many genuine relationships we can make with people around us, right? Okay. And then I'm going to come back here and hang out. But you know what? Since I'm hanging here at church, right, because we're not just doing sermons, we're actually fellowshipping and caring about each other.
That's a whole other conversation.
Right? I know it is. But let's say that's what we're doing, right?
That's what we're doing.
Well, if I'm sitting around watching the Chiefs game at the church building, and Joe says to me on Tuesday, because I've got a good friend, because I'm his good friend, because I went out to be a meaningful relationships, Joe says, hey, where are you watching the game at on Sunday? I say, oh, man, me and some of the people get together at my church, man. There's going to be some food and stuff like that. Yeah, you should come through. Joe's more likely to come to that than he is if I'm trying to be like, give me an hour of your day to interrupt you. You see what I'm saying? Like, we have to begin to see our church as what it was once again. And that was as me and you, right? Versus something else. And so in that sense, I would say, yeah, man, I think we're oftentimes, it's the same thing we do at our organization that we work at. So we work in an organization.
Because that's where I was going next.
That's
now, if all I had
bring it out, man,
was 20 seconds to tell people about this wonderful organization. And as you know, because you're the one that orchestrates all this stuff, we do so much.
We do so much
stuff. To tell you in its totality, you may not give me that allotted time.
Right.
So what do I hit you with?
And I would say, you and I both know the answer to that, right? If I get 20 seconds to talk to you and I want you to be involved in our organization, here's the beauty of it, right? At our USC, we have internal and external metrics, right?
Right.
right? And our external metrics are this is how people measure us. Our internal metrics are what we actually do in the lives of our family, right?
Right.
Depends on who you're talking to, right? If I'm talking to someone that I'm trying to convince to donate to the USC, right? Then for them, it might be important, right, that they get the external metrics. And so I say, oh yeah, we serve 1,600 kids a month. We serve 2,200 individuals a month, right? For them, right? Because that's the good news for them.
Right.
But if I'm talking to a family who needs our help, right? They've never heard of the USC. I don't go to them with the external metrics.
Right.
I don't be like, look, we serve 1,600 people. No, I say, hey, we got a free food store.
Mm-hmm.
Do you need food? Hey, we offer free mental health counseling because that's the good news for them.
Right.
And that's what I'm going back to, right? If we have the gospel of Jesus, if we have the gospel of the kingdom of heaven, if our focus is making sure that people get the good news of either one of them, then we preach the entire gospel instead of just preaching one part, no matter what.
So real quick, so you talked about in those examples that you just gave me, we talked about like a potential donor or somebody that wants to give. So they have interest in what we do.
Correct.
You're talking to a family who is in need, who know who we are, so they have an interest in what
Or they don't know who we are.
So that was going to be my thing. So if I don't know your need, I don't know your angle, let's say you don't know me from a can of paint, and I need to tell you about the USC, and I don't have the allotted time needed to give you the full, or to even fill you out to see where you at.
So what do you say?
No, I'm asking you.
No, I'm asking you.
I'm asking you, sir.
No, I'm asking. Well, you know what I would say, right?
What would you say?
If I'm talking to a family and I say, hey, listen, here's what we care about. We just want to love everybody in this community and help them to flourish in the way that we know that they were designed to do. And so what we try to do is we try to put together services for as many people as we can in as many ways as we can. We'd love to hear more about you and see if there's a way we can do that for you, right? That's how I would do that if it was that family.
Right.
Because in that sense, I'm saying to them, what I want to do is figure out how we can be good news to you, right? I'm not going to but if I come to them and I just be like, yo, we got life enrichment. You got to get your kid in there. We going to disciple them. And then they turn to me and they're like, I ain't got no kids. Now I seem silly because I came pre-planned with what they need to know in order for it to really count for the USC. Right. Instead of thinking, how do I actually hope this person can hear the good news of what we do? Okay. And that's what I think we want to do with the gospel. We want to look at people and say, how can this person hear the good news of what we do? And what I can tell you right now, whether we want to admit it or not, and I know a bunch of people don't, what we don't want to admit right now is that these past few years have really messed up what people hear when you say the word Christian, when you say death, burial, resurrection, stuff like that. Just to be clear, we don't want to admit it, but there's a lot of muddiness that came in.
We ain't do that on our own, though. A lot of that comes from people proclaiming to be a part of the crew.
Whatever it is.
And they show otherwise. So I'm like, so you can't put all of that on the stuff that we know. I'm not saying that
I'm saying that's the reality of the situation.
It is the reality. The reality of the sense is this. And this is just my own opinion.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
We are looked at as jokes, as Christians, to the masses.
Yeah.
Even though a lot of people claim to be Christian. And I think that's part of the reason.
I was at a store and I was talking to a guy on the phone and we were having a debate similar to what we're doing here.
Okay.
We're not debating, but
yet.
We were actually debating on the phone. And I said to him, hey man, I'm worried because I think the next thing you're going to say is you don't think I'm a Christian. Right.
That's a real fear when speaking to other fellow Christians.
I know.
Wait, let me miss 2 Sundays.
I know, man. But
I don't want to go there. Let's keep there.
So I said that, but I'm just saying the reason I shared that story is because when I said that, I was talking to the person on the phone. There was a person standing next to me in the store, and they said, whenever a Christian's around, it's not good. That's what they said.
That's what I'm saying. But this is what the church has to fight. So if I'm going out having to convince a person like that and having to give them the good news, they already have their preconceived notions when I come to them.
Yeah.
You're right. They already have their mind made up in a lot of sense. Some of them probably just don't know.
Yeah.
So are you saying that as a church, we should probably do a better job on including the other gospel?
Oh, I'm saying it's way more effective in that situation.
Okay.
Right? Because here's the issue, right? Is everybody, because of what's happened, feels like they have an idea of what the gospel is. So if you come in and be like, well, let me tell you about the gospel, they're going to be like, come on, man. But if you said to them, that person, right, and you said to them, hey, I want to be clear, what part of what Jesus taught do you have a problem with?
Oh, now you're going into apologetics.
Well, no, I'm asking. Jesus taught.
Okay.
See, because here's the thing.
Because if they don't know.
Right. So now they may not know. Or here's what I often find. No one actually has a problem with Jesus or what he taught. They may have a problem with us, Christians, but I rarely hear anybody. I've never heard anybody be like, yo, Jesus gets on my nerves. When he healed people, I hated it. When I don't hear anybody say that.
I get more disrespect. I get, he wasn't real. That's what I get.
Sure.
Right? Okay. So in those situations then.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I love those situations.
All right.
Right. For me, I have a, this sounds hilarious. I have a completely atheist gospel. Right. I say, all right, well, that's fine.
I don't know why I do this.
I know. Yeah.
I just walk myself.
Okay, but I know you did. Yeah. But I got a completely atheist gospel. Here's what I say.
Go on.
All right, if Jesus is 100%, let's say, we know he was historical, right? We know that part. So you can say he's not real. And I'll say, okay, well, then every scholarship that you would use to evaluate whether he was an actual person would disagree with you. But let's say, all right, let's say he's just a human. He was a historical human, right? Then I say, okay. And then what I believe is that Jesus, just like he was 100% God, he was 100% human, right? That means in every interaction he interacted with somebody, he was as human as possible. I said, then I'm just trying to get you to do that. Do exactly what he did. Be as human as possible. Look at every situation he was in, see how human he was to everybody involved in it, and do that. And if I can get you to follow Jesus that way, I believe the Holy Spirit will take care of the rest.
Okay.
Right. So, that's my gospel. That's my atheist gospel.
So that's what. Okay.
Yeah. That's
no, ain't nothing wrong with it. But I'm just saying, like, so in terms of what the church could be doing in the future, in your mind, to better improve.
You don't care about my atheist gospel, then?
No. I'm not knocking it out. I'm not knocking it out. No, I like the fact that you actually have something ready to tell them. Mm-hmm. Like, because I feel like a lot of times churches equip their members to go out and just say, yeah, Jesus came, he died, he resurrected, and you're saved because of it. Mm-hmm. And that's it. Mm-hmm. So if there ever was further conversation to be had, a lot of times they find themselves to be stuck and can't do it. Right. So I do understand. I would open my mind up to saying, like, there's more that you can tell them.
There's more than you can
There's more that you can fight with. Uh-huh. How about you tell them, well, I get that part. So transition into another thing that you brought up. All right. When you were going through what you were going through when it was being widely televised, all these unarmed shootings of black men going on, and how distraught it left you, and how you went to the church, the place that you were instructed to go for answers and didn't get any.
Exactly.
So...
Okay.
Yeah. And that happens a lot. Don't get me wrong.
No, I'm listening.
And I'm not saying that there was a way that I could deem that okay. Mm-hmm. But what I can say, though, is this: the pressure that I feel like a lot of churches have is that, like, and maybe this is an issue that they have too, in the same sense. A lot of times, even when things like that come about, we get a lot of people that come to church because they may have heard, may possibly, but like, how, as a pastor, when you get a lot of new faces, when you just see a lot of faces that you may not know, and it's time to give a message, right? How does a pastor, because you got to keep it under an hour too, so that's where some of the problems come in. So how does a pastor decide, like, what do I lead with? Like,
I think that's easy. That's what I'm saying. That's why you have to know Jesus's philosophy. See, the gospel is concrete, right? But Jesus didn't teach the gospel of Jesus. He taught the gospel of the kingdom of heaven. It was a philosophy. Any philosophy is designed to allow you to be able to apply it to different parts of your life, right? So Jesus's philosophy is highest good for God, yourself, and others, right? So if you're the pastor and you get up and you know something happened that week, then you get up and you say, hey, listen, I know something happened this week, and I know that many of you are struggling, and I know that many of you all may not know what to do or how to handle this or whatever it is, right? But what I want to talk about today is how Jesus's philosophy can guide you through that. You see, Jesus said that you should look and you should see how can you be the highest good to God, yourself, and others. So when you leave here and you're struggling and you don't know what to do, here's what I tell you to do. Look around. How can you be the highest good to someone there? Look at yourself. How can you be the highest good to yourself? Look at God. What would he want for you in this moment? And so, no, I'm not going to get up here and tell you this one was wrong and that one was wrong. And let's be clear, Wes has a clear idea of who he thought was wrong.
Of course.
But I'm not going to get up here and do that. But what I am going to do is tell you that Jesus' philosophy of searching for the highest good, if you get it as a philosophy, right? If every time you approach a McDonald's employee, if every time you're driving your car, if every time you're working at work, if every time you're sitting with your family, you get in the practice of saying to yourself, what's the highest good for everyone here? And I learned to balance that, right? Then you can learn to navigate whatever is messy. And I can disagree with you, right? And still want your highest good that way, right? I could say, man, Lawrence does not get it. But what's the highest good for Lawrence in that? What's the highest good for me? Well, the highest good for me may be that I can't have these conversations with him anymore. But what I can do is pray that maybe he can hear my compassion when I was talking about it, right? So now I've done the highest good for everybody involved, right? And we still disagree. But that's what Jesus teaching. That's why Jesus gave us the philosophy, because he knew life was messy. But we try to act like the concrete gospel is the only thing that works. And I'm saying, no, Jesus actually taught. And that's the part. If I could summarize everything that I would say to anybody down to 1-2-word things, it would be Jesus taught, right? He did something. It's not just Jesus. Jesus taught. He taught stuff, right? We act like that's such a foreign concept. He didn't just exist. He taught. So why would he teach? Oh, because if we can learn what he taught, it has implications for us for life abundantly from here through eternity. But we have to recognize that he taught. He didn't just exist. He didn't just die. He didn't just resurrect. He didn't just do that. He taught. Jesus taught.
I get it completely.
Okay, all right.
What I'm trying to wrap my mind around is that, like, do you honestly feel in your heart of hearts? And I don't even think you are off if you do feel this way, that a lot of churches are just not doing that. Because it's kind of hard for me to fathom listening to a T.D. Jakes. And I'm not going to even try to categorize how he's, or what gospel he's trying to teach me, but there's power in some of those messages.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, I don't think, here's what I think. I think the beauty of what Jesus taught is that he lived perfectly, right? And so I don't think you can get wrong. I don't think you can go wrong talking about Jesus.
Okay.
I don't think you can go wrong.
Okay.
But I do think you can not go complete, right? I think you can't go wrong, but Jesus makes it very clear, like he's a way. You know, it's a path. You know what I mean? Like it's a way, right? And so
there's a way to do this.
Yeah, I don't think you can go wrong, right? And I don't have a problem with, TDJ. I don't have a problem with anybody, right? Here's the problem. Here's where I think Jesus' philosophy really helped me, right? Is I think I'm getting really good at it. And that sounds scary to a lot of people, but I think I'm getting really good at being able to say, what's the highest good for everybody that I might interact with? I think I'm getting pretty good at it, right? And so for me, I can do things like people that I totally disagree with, right? If I go into a church right now and they be like, women can't ever be elders and pastors. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, right?
Right.
But I would say, okay, that's fine. But recognize that I'm following Jesus' philosophy. So what he chose to live, the way he chose to teach and live. And I would say, women played a real important part there, right? We know that they helped support Jesus. We know they did all kinds. So then I say to you, hey, fine. I don't know if I agree with that, but you say that's what it is, right? You believe that women shouldn't preach, teach, whatever. So how are you then being intentional about making sure women are essential in your ministry? How are you then saying, well, I don't believe they can do this role, but if we don't have them doing this, then they will not then our ministry will not be able to function, right? And so in that sense, I would say, if you don't have that, then I'm saying I can't rock with you because you're not following Jesus' philosophy. But if you say, oh yeah, we don't believe that they could be pastors, but the women in our church are right now, we know that anything we teach, that they're going to have to carry home or whatever. So we do it this way. And then we do this part and we do this. And we make sure that women know that we cannot function as the body of Christ without them. And I'll be like, yo, that's Jesus' philosophy. That's how he chose to live. That's the highest good for the women in your church, making sure they can see themselves as part of the work being done there. And so that's the kind of thing that I think for me, if we begin to recognize Jesus taught a philosophy, and the philosophy gives you guidelines that apply to any situation in your life. And that's why we need the gospel of the kingdom of heaven, because it's going to teach us how to live in our life, not just how to go to heaven.
Okay. I can open my mind to something like that. I can open my mind to like challenging, issuing a challenge to the church that like, hey, look how you, everything, how you organize, how you evangelize, and all these other things, but do it under the guise of Jesus had another part.
Yeah, Jesus taught.
Jesus taught.
That Jesus taught.
There's a philosophy of what he just taught. Incorporate that in with all the other good things that you're doing, and see where your church can.
Yeah. And I think we might have to save this one for next one, but that's when understanding Jesus as teaching philosophy and teaching a philosophy becomes really important when it comes to reading scripture.
Oh, yeah, that's definitely a different
conversation.
That's definitely a different conversation.
Read scripture, how does that change that? So, yeah, man, I'm excited, man.
I like this.
This was fun. Yeah,
that's fine. I'm like, because it took a while for us to get there.
I don't know.
In my mind, it did.
We covered a lot of ground, man.
We did cover a lot.
We covered a lot.
We did cover a lot of ground, but I am open to the challenge of that, even in my own life, in my own walk, because we all as Christians are called to evangelism.
Exactly.
No matter how you feel about it, because I'm a shy person. Right. I'm not the person to come up and start telling you about. But I know in the time and in the moments that I have a time to evangelize to somebody and tell them about the goodness of Jesus, I am going to challenge myself a little more to say like, there's this, and then there's this.
Yeah. Let me teach you what he taught. Yeah.
But I do like.
I rock with that.
Now, one thing I will point out, and I will say that. I can say that I haven't did a lot of time doing. And it's just because of how I came to learn what evangelism is, the timepiece. The timepiece. Yeah. They used to put so much on emphasis on the little time that you had to give them something. Yeah. Instead of like, what if I had the time that I needed? What would I say?
What would I do? Yeah.
So I'm going to take that challenge with you.
Yeah. Okay.
I like that.
All right, man.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I might come back next week.
Yeah. We got to do this a lot.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Thank you.
Appreciate it.